The first one, The Weathering of Sea Glass, is set in a coastal tourist trap kind of town, like Old Orchard Beach. And for my Pennsylvania friends, it's kind of like a smaller ocean city kind of town, I guess, with tiny little beach shops and tourists who swarm the place. And it's more of a family saga that unfolds over 35 years. It tells the tale of two 18-year-old lovers who were torn apart due to some certain circumstances, torn apart for 35 years before they reconnect as older adults. And like Sea Glass, they are much different when they reunite in their 50s. They're softer around the edges and not as jagged or rough, and entirely different. Moose Pond Lodge and Thriving of Willows takes place at a fictional resort in northern Maine. I got the idea for that one while I was driving up over a very scary, treacherous, mountainous part of northern Maine, and seeing all these little cabins along the way made me wonder who lives this far up out and runs these kind of places. And that's where the idea for Moose Pond Lodge came. And it's centered around a woman who goes through a messy divorce and has to return to Moose Pond Lodge, where she grew up, because her father passes away and leaves her the resort. She had left Maine with no intention of ever returning, so it's not something she truly wants to do until she gets there. And she starts to fix up the resort, and in turn starts to fix up her life and reconnect with who she really is and the home that she's always loved. And Thriving of Willows is a year later at the same resort with couples who come back year after year to celebrate milestones and the events that take place in all of their lives. So that's the gist of the three I have out now, but Maine plays a very central role in all three books. The setting is pretty much another character, as with a lot of books, but I really focus on my setting. And that's what inspires the stories to begin with. I always come up with the setting first.
Tell us about your fourth book, without giving any spoilers, of course.
Yeah. Well, my fourth one, Home for the Windswept, is my only one that takes place the majority outside of Maine. It starts in Maine, and I guess the short version of it would be a 23-year-old couple who live in northern Maine in a paper mill town. And to those of you outside of Maine, that is or was a huge and only business in some of those communities in northern Maine. It starts in 2008 during the recession. When the recession hits and the tech boom collide, the paper mills start to shut down, which really devastated those towns in real life in that year and the subsequent years afterwards. Well, for this 23-year-old couple who know nothing else, it pretty much results in losing everything. It's Darcy and Basil Sullivan. And Darcy is pregnant with their third child at 23. She got pregnant in high school. They married, obviously very young. She had another child, and then on her third pregnancy is when their entire world falls apart. Well, Basil is watching the news one night when everything has just been taken away from them, and he's at his most desperate. He's watching the news and he sees footage of a tornado that has swept through Nebraska and destroyed a town. As he watches the footage, he starts to think about how man has taken everything from him, with the recession, with the greed of Wall Street, with the technology boom. Everything he's ever counted on and everything he ever knew is gone because of man's greed. So he has an idea that God's wrath, the tornadoes, will provide. He decides on a whim that they're going to move to Nebraska and clean up tornado damage, and God will provide everything that man has taken from them. So of course, Darcy, who's 23 and nearing the end of her third pregnancy, thinks he has lost his mind, just like everyone else in town. But he does convince her that the way to support themselves is to follow God's wrath. And they set out on a journey from Maine to Nebraska, where they set out to do exactly that and see if they can survive that way, or if maybe Basil really has had a breakdown. So that's the gist of that one so far, without giving too much away.
Is it all finished, or are you still
Yes.
kind of polishing it up so it's all finished? And
No, it is all finished. I submitted it to the publisher a few weeks ago. They sent it back with a few edits and suggestions, and the final version is ready to go back to them, where the cover art will begin and all of that process will start to unfold, and it has a release date in April. So that's when it will officially be out.
all right, well, I'll make sure that our budget is set to get that in April. What so you're also a freelance writer. Who have you freelance written for?
Well, I got into that. I used to do newspaper work fresh out of college, newspaper and radio news. And I did that for a few years. And in Massachusetts, went back to newspaper work. I took a break when my kids were pretty young, and I was a substitute teacher in their school whenever they were in elementary school. Well, then boom comes the internet and opportunities to write from home for money, which wasn't available when I first got out of college, of course, because the digital era hadn't exploded yet. So I started seeking out opportunities that way, and I wrote for marketing firms. I wrote legal websites. There were magazines that I worked for. One of my favorite was called Baja Living, a magazine in Baja, Mexico. And I worked for them for several years, writing articles about all of the events going on down there, and for the snowbirds and charity events and tourism and everything going on in Baja. And they always told me if I showed up, I had a place to stay. The two publishers, it was a married couple who published the magazine, and I never jumped on a plane and went. But like many other magazines, that kind of folded over a few years. But that was definitely a fun opportunity working for them, and it morphed into other magazine work as we moved around. So as far as the Army opportunity came up, they wanted somebody in the recruiting brigade in Fort Knox to write profiles of medical professionals. And my husband was a recruiter down there. That's what, well, he was working at the recruiting brigade. Long story short, the people who needed the work done knew us, and I applied, and I got a government contract to write articles about all the medical advances happening in the Army at that time, and profiling military doctors who were making a big difference in medicine as far as diabetes research goes and breast cancer research, which a lot of people don't know, but Walter Reed has the largest bank of breast cancer tissue in the entire world. And they do more research on breast cancer than any civilian hospital or research center in the entire country. So it was interesting to talk to military doctors who were hands-on in the middle of that kind of research and innovation. So it was definitely a favorite freelance gig of mine.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. And you're a ghostwriter as well. Is there anybody that you can tell us, or who you ghost wrote for?
No, nobody remotely famous, just people who wanted romance novels or some novellas written but didn't want to attach their name to it, and basically paid me. I wrote a few romance novels that were really, really cheesy and not the kind of stuff I would ever want my name on, to tell you the truth. And I got paid to write a couple of kind of hokey self-help books too, which which was fun to do. But yeah, nothing I wanted to put my name on, and certainly nothing remotely famous. But once I was doing the romance ghostwriting, and I had written, I think 3 for one particular woman, and she wanted military romance, and they were a little bit on the spicy side. But once I wrote those and I started reading the reviews on them online, I thought, well, holy smokes, I need to be putting my own stuff out there and not just handing it over for a couple $100. And so that's kind of what prompted me to really take a chance at throwing my own fiction out there with my name on it, to see where it kind of went from there.
Any of the titles you wish to disclose, or?
No. No. And I would certainly never admit to some of the scenes I wrote in a few of them too. One was a biker romance. Actually, it was a 2-part biker romance, and I have never been on a motorcycle in my life, so it was.
Well, I'm gonna Google biker romance novels and see what I can find.
See if you can skim through a few and spot some sentences that sound like what I would throw in there or something.
Now, did you collaborate with the people that you ghost wrote for, as far as the content or the lot or the scene itself, or was it just all you and you just put your name on it or put their name on it?
They would, the handful of people I did it for, they would give me kind of scenarios. Like, we want a military romance where the guy's in the Air Force and he meets a girl fresh out of wherever. And I would just go from there. And they would give me a length, pretty much. And one would give some feedback where she's like, well, if you're going to have this happen, I want a little bit of this thrown in, or, you know, whatnot. But some direction, but not really a whole lot. Everything from how it unfolded, pretty much, and the basic characters were all just me.
Because I always wondered about the ghostwriters. Is it somebody else's idea that it's just they don't know how to put the words together, so they get a writer to be able to put the words together plus the connections to get it published? Or how much of that is theirs? How much of it is yours?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on the person. Like, the one woman I did it for, she basically just told me, you know, I want a story between this kind of person and this kind of person, and I want it to be this long. And it was just all open-ended how I wanted to navigate it. And I think with the military romance ones, she kind of left a lot of that up to me because I was an Army wife at the time and she had no connection to the military. So I think that's kind of how I got that job. When I applied for that, I stressed that was the lifestyle I was living, so I could write authentically about romance in the military.
So you're also a blogger. You have a blog called, and I believe this is the title though, Writing All Over the World?
Writing All Over the Map.
Map.
Yes.
I can't even read my own writing here. That's why I'm not a writer, because I would be able to read what I wrote.
Yes, that started out as a travel blog that would kind of, center around places we lived as a military family. That was the intent behind that. And the first one I wrote actually to my daughter and about my daughter on our first trip to Walden when she was a toddler. And that's what kind of sparked it. I wanted to capture these snippets of our life moving from state to state every few years, and the really cool places that we got to travel to and visit, and the regions that we got to immerse ourselves in. I wanted to capture all of that. So it's more for my kids than it is for public consumption, I would think. But my big regret is that I haven't been as diligent with keeping up with it. I probably do maybe one a year now, and the intent was to try and capture everything. So if I buckle down and really dedicate myself to it, I could probably add to it every month if I really sat back and thought about some of the experiences we've had. But I think everybody goes through that whenever you do any type of journaling or trying to chronicle your life, and you get out of the habit of doing it, and then you realize how much you haven't written, and you want to go back and do it. I vow every year to be more diligent with it, and I'm failing once again. But I love the posts that are up there, and I've started to try and connect some of them to my writing. One of my last ones was related to a home for the windswept and a trip out to rural Nebraska. We have friends who are actually farmers in Nebraska, and we went and stayed with them when we were living with Omaha, a few hours west to the middle of nowhere. And I wrote one of the blog posts about an abandoned church that sits literally in the middle of nowhere. And just the power of seeing those kind of abandoned structures, but they're still just holding on, and still a powerful site, even though they're not being maintained or used. So I kind of capture what I feel at the moment I want to share.
So are these from when you were traveling as an Army wife, or personal, just sort of on vacation and things like that? So the blog kind of stretches all that?
It's all places related to our travels as a military family, because when you're a military family and you get stationed somewhere, you become a tourist where you live, and you spend your time, touring nearby where you are, getting to know the region. You don't just stay on the Army post. And ignore the world around you. Like when we were in Kentucky, we were so close to the Bourbon Trail, where some of the greatest bourbon distilleries in the country are, like within 20 miles of Jim Beam. So you go and you tour around, and you basically vacation where you live. And for us, and I know a lot of other military families too, the vacation time that your military spouse does take, that's when you go home to see family. You go back to your hometown to visit your parents and your siblings. But your actual life is like a vacation.
Yeah, we used to live out in California, and that's what we'd have to do is our vacation would come back here to
Yep.
visit family. And of course, by the time we saw everybody, there was no time left for us to
Oh,
do
I
and
know.
just sit and
It's
relax, you
exhausting.
know?
It would be exhausting. We would take a week or two in the summer and go stay with our parents and go see all of our siblings, go from house to house to house, and every 3 days pack the kids and the dogs back up in the car and go to another grandparent's house. And then by the time you get back to your actual home, you're exhausted.
It's time to go to the airport.
Yeah, that's what we did every summer, and sometimes on holidays, is we just vacationed going home.
Oh, was your trip to Mexico part of Army travels, or was that?
Oh, I didn't go.
Oh, that's right.
No,
You didn't go. You didn't go. Okay,
no,
that's right.
I should have. I should have taken advantage of that. The couple of years I wrote for them, I should have
Yeah.
just hopped on a plane and shown up. They lived right on the beach. They had a
Wow.
beautiful home. Yeah, they were just living the dream out there. And they would, every time they would email stuff and send me money, of course, for my articles. Like, if you ever make it down, you have a place to stay, just come on by. And yeah.
What were their names?
Yeah.
So, do you ever think of taking your blogs and making kind of a biography out of it, or just sort of a biography of your travels?
Yeah. Yeah, I really do. I have thought about that. And it's something I wish I had dedicated more time to, but I mean, I still have the chance. There's not really a time limit on that. Everything's still up here. It's not like there's so many years passed since we visited this place or that place that I can't write it. But yeah, I really do. Even if I just kind of printed it out to have for myself or to give to my kids, that would be well worth it too. But what's funny is I think in the back of my mind a lot that there's a real market for that if I really stress the military travels and
Hmm.
the situations we found ourselves in and the places that we stumbled upon. Like in the middle of Nebraska, we ended up, Willa Cather's house is in the middle of nowhere. And I had read Oh Pioneers in college, and it just always, her story always stuck with me. And while she wasn't an author that I was, particularly enthralled with, it was always something in the back of my head. And then boom, you're driving down a dirt road and you turn and there's Willa Cather's house. And so things like that I really should capture, because a lot of that stuff's unplanned. A lot of our travels and things that we stumble into is just, we just kind of stumble into, including my first one where I wrote about my daughter going into Walden Pond for the first time. And I had always loved everything about Thoreau and Emerson and Transcendentalist. And ever since high school, that was always in the back of my mind, that that's where I wanted to go and experience. And the first time we did, with just me and the kids, my husband was at work, and she just took off running for Walden and threw herself into Walden Pond and splashing around. And it was just such a beautiful experience of, wow, Thoreau really would have loved to see this kid just throw herself into the water.
Nice.
So yeah, so it memories like that I've tried to capture. And it's kind of a fish out of water feel, which is what this next book is about too. These kids, when they're on this journey that they're on, they're completely out of their element. They had never, ever, ever left Woonsocket, Maine, which is the fictional name of the town. And they find themselves in all of these little situations with these two toddlers. And some of it does mirror things that happened to us along the way. So, but I should keep up a bit more.
So in your fourth book, you had mentioned it also it revolves around paper mills and stuff. How much research did you have to do on the paper mill? Because up here in New Hampshire anyways, and I think it was up in Berlin, the paper mills are pretty much non-existent and very, very tough times with the paper mills. Western Massachusetts, same thing. So
Yep.
how much research did you have to do to include that in your story?
Well, I did a lot of research online and reading a lot of newspaper articles, especially from that time when the recession first started unfolding. And I lived here in Maine at the time when the recession hit, and we had friends who, like an independent contractor and friends like that who, their work just kind of suffered immediately. But I did do a lot of research online to how the paper industry fell apart. And when my dad was in the Army, retired when I was in my early teens and moved us to small town Pennsylvania. And it's the same kind of town where there's just a handful of real opportunities and jobs. And when things like a recession hit those kinds of communities, people suffer immediately. And there's not a lot of other options. There's good jobs in those communities, and then there's jobs that you're not going to live the same standard of life if you have to switch. And so just being able to relate to what happens in those kinds of towns when events out of their control unfold, like the recession. It was nobody's fault in a paper mill town that everything fell apart like they did. And it was all out of their hands. And there's a sense of desperation of, what do we do now? What can we even do now? And that's what Basil Sullivan really goes through, because he's a proud man who takes care of his family on his own, even though he's so young. They got married right away, and they've stepped up. And like he says, we've done everything right. We've taken care of everything on our own, and now it's all gone. And so that's kind of what inspired it. It's more of the personal story behind those kinds of places when things come crashing to a halt. And a lot of places are in the same situation now with the pandemic. I mean, I know things are, kind of grinding back to somewhat of a normal, but a lot of those same kind of communities, it throws you off kilter. And that's what happens to this couple. They're just left completely in limbo and at a very desperate state of, how are we going to do this? What do we do now? Because like I said, that none of it was in their hands and in their control. And speaking of research with the paper mills, I actually Googled the sound, because that plays a big role in the beginning of the book too. And just listening to the sound of a paper mill, living near that, and the smells and the sound, and when all of that disappears, that's another thing that throws Darcy off, because like she says, that's been a one constant in her life, was always hearing that sound and always smelling those smells on her father and Basil and her twin brother, who all work at the mill. And then when that's all gone, it's like your whole being, everything that has kept you grounded and that as a definite in your life is gone. So they have to recalibrate, and they get a little bit of vertigo, and they hit the road, which in my opinion, it's like just a brave step. Even though she thinks he's crazy, she has no choice but to go. And I'm pregnant with a third baby. What else is she going to do? But to me, it's just very inspiring, because they do the courageous, brave, crazy thing with no real sense of where they're going and how they're going to do it. But they've got to do something. So.
Is there kind of or maybe a little personal aspect of that, as being an Army family and traveling all the time? You just kind of go and see where it takes you, see what comes without, I'm a planner. I like to plan where I'm going.
Yeah.
Well, let me back up. I used to be. I'm a lot better now. I try not to plan things too much, but I used to be a planner and have to know how long it takes to get there, when we're going to get there, where we're going to stop. But so it sounds like they just kind of threw caution to the wind and go. Is that how do you get that inspiration from your travels?
Yes, but we're planners too. And when you've got kids in tow and
Yeah.
dogs, and you need to know where a hotel is going to take dogs, and where the closest place is for breakfast and whatnot, there's an element of planning, but there's also a leap of faith every time you you pack up and go. But the difference is in a military family is we know what's waiting for us. It's you're going there because you have to, and the Army says you're getting stationed here on this date, be there. So there's that bit of I guess grounding. It's not necessarily throwing caution to the wind and going where you don't know where you're going to get your next meal from, or if you're going to have a roof over your head. All of those worries are gone, but it's still a leap of faith as far as not knowing the place that awaits you and not knowing if you're going to make friends or if you're going to fit in the community or if you're going to love it or hate it, because there's no choice in how long you're there. It's not like you can land on a military post and go, oh, this sucks. Next month we're scooting on out of town. You're there for a certain period of time. So there is that element of fear and throwing caution to the wind and just thinking, I have to make the best of this no matter what. I have to make it a home for my kids. I have to make it a place that I will at least survive, for the next few years, or I have to try and find, friends like me. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of throwing caution to the wind and not knowing what to expect. And there's some of that in the book. Like one particular part of the book is they break down in Pennsylvania, and they're stranded there for a few days in a very, very small, friendly, wonderful, middle of nowhere town in Pennsylvania. I based that on a mix of my hometown where my father retired and moved us to, and where my husband grew up. I kind of blended the two communities, but that's where I had them break down for a few days. And it's the kindness of others that get them through that limbo, because it's literally the midway point for them. That's based on my husband and I actually breaking down on our move from Pennsylvania to Massachusetts. It was over Memorial Day weekend. So all the rental car places and the car dealership where our car was towed to were all closed for 3 days, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So we were stranded in a hotel in a town. We were in Connecticut where we knew nothing or no one. We had no vehicle, and we had our kid, and we just had to kind of make it work and find a place to eat and find something to do for 3 days. So that's where I kind of got the idea for Darcy and Basil breaking down and trying to figure it out. So that part actually is based on what happened to us.
So in all the books, just take all the books collectively, any of the characters based on real people, are they, or do you just take little bits and pieces from all the people that you know and kind of mash them together and say, okay, this character is definitely is this person?
I steal quirks from people, and I steal how some of my characters look. And actually, Beth Bragdon, who's listening right now, in The Weathering of Sea Glass, Beth, who is Denny's nephew's wife, is actually physically 100% based on my friend Beth. When you read The Weathering of Sea Glass, and he describes Beth with a Mona Lisa kind of look and the very beautiful skin and the long dark hair, that's Beth. I just basically stole her face and then I named the character Beth. And Denny, the main character, is based on one of our good friends' father and how he looked and his mannerisms. So I take a few characters and do things like that with, but a lot of them are pieces of people. Like Simone in Thriving of Willows. If anybody's read that, I talk about her fidgeting a lot with her hands, because she's a little bit of a tightly wound, because she's deeply unhappy in the situation she's in. But I have her do things like this with her fingers a lot, and I have her fidgeting. That is stolen from a friend of mine from high school who sat doing that all the time with her fingers. And it's just one of those things that stuck in my head, little quirks like that I would, I kind of shoplift from people. And I do, it's weird, but like when we're at restaurants or anything like that before the pandemic, when you could just kind of sit there 3 feet away from somebody. And I would steal from people how they talk when I overhear conversations. I I would steal their look and their mannerisms. And I remember, I think it was last year, Christmas shopping. Yeah, it was last year, Christmas shopping. My husband and I had stopped for dinner on the way back. We were up at North Conway at the outlets, and can't remember the name of the restaurant. It's a well-known restaurant between here and there. And we were sitting there eating. There was a woman at the bar, and the way she was fiddling with her drink and how she was sitting there alone, and just the way she was dressed and her mannerisms. I took out a notebook because, you know, it's every writer does. You always have some kind of notebook and pen. I'm not a phone jot down person unless I literally have no choice, but I took out a notebook and jotted down how she looked and what she was doing. And this entire kind of scenario popped into my head about how she was so happy he didn't show up, that she was just thankful that she was able to sit there by herself and fiddle with her drink and trying to figure out what to do next. So little things like that you steal from people.
So you had, we'll talk about your writing habits and your process in a little bit, but a couple other things. So a lot of your books seem to, well, a lot of your books and also your ghostwriting books are sort of romance type, drama type. What was it that draws you to that genre of romance or drama, more personal, contemporary type works?
Well, oddly enough, I hate to admit this, I love reading historical fiction, but I don't want to put in the time and energy to research, to write historical fiction. So the truly honest answer for writing contemporary fiction is it's easier than researching a time period down to the very, you know, petticoat shoes that somebody wore and things like, so that's why I do contemporary. I'm not so sure I really do, like my books aren't necessarily romance. They're more of relationship, kind of women's fiction relationships. I just think that's where I feel most drawn to stories. And I'm not a big fan of the happily ever after romance, boy meets girl, something goes wrong, they get back together, something goes wrong again, and then boom, happily ever after. I'm not a big fan of those. I like more of actual relationships developing and unfolding in an organic kind of natural way, and not necessarily a happily ever after. That's
That's
just,
kind of the premise of one of your books, and I'm sorry, I don't remember which one, but where they started off as a teenage romance, but
yeah,
then they
whether
drifted
in the
apart,
sequel.
then they found each other later on, decades down the road,
Yeah,
and that dynamic between what their lives were compared to what their lives are. Which book
yeah,
was that?
Weathering of Sea Glass.
Let's see. That's okay.
Yeah, and it's not really a romance. It's more what unfolds in their lives as they reach that stage in life. And even when they do reconnect, it's not necessarily in a romantic way. It's more in a your soul knows my soul, and we're still deep down the same people we were, even though we've been through these things and we're extremely different
Mm-hmm.
in how we see the world. It's not necessarily a romance, but more of just how people grow. That's what I think I would label it more as women's fiction, because
Okay.
it's always a strong female lead character who has to overcome things on her own and make a better life for herself. And even with A Home for the Windswept, there are a couple, but it's Darcy's story. Darcy is the narrator of this story, and she's the one who is telling their experience.
When did you first start writing?
Oh my
Was it
God.
something that you've done way back when you were a kid, writing, little short stories in school or something? And is that what inspired you? Or was there a particular author that you read as when you were younger or as a kid that inspired you to start writing?
Yeah, both actually. I was always writing little short stories and making up characters, and I even did a lot of drawing, where I would draw female characters and different hairstyles and hair color and facial features, and I would give them names. But I would write a lot of short stories. I was greatly inspired. This is the best gift I got as a kid. It's going to sound kind of cheesy, but my mom bought me the Little House on the Prairie books, Laura Ingalls Wilder, when I was very young. And the minute I started reading those stories, I thought, wow, this is just about this girl's childhood and her family. It's not some big dramatic epic, like Beowulf. There's no, great journey or hero or any, it's just the story of this girl growing up. And that's the thing that first put it into my head that you can just write about being a girl growing up. And, and those are good stories. Little Women, I remember getting that at a very young age and reading that and wanting to be like Jo. And those are the books that first fanned the flames of being a writer. And it was always in the back of my head that that's what I was going to do. And I remember in high school, I did, very well in biology and science, and I went to college for biology. I was a biology major the first 2 years. And I always had it in the back of my head thinking, well, I'm going to write some books on the side. That's what I'll do for fun. Because I was still always writing little stories, nothing crazy, not, huge novels, but I was always jotting down that kind of stuff and had lots of little short stories here and there. And it wasn't until midway through my sophomore year, I had taken a humanities literature class and another English class where the professor actually sat me down and said, "Why aren't you an English major?" And it sounds, it sounds kind of funny and pivotal, but that's when it clicked. And I remember sitting there thinking, why am I not an English major? This is what I want to be doing. This is where I want to be. And so I switched. In the middle of that semester, I went from being a biology major to being an English major, and full steam ahead thinking, well, I'm going to be a writer. And I did go into journalism and marketing communications and worked as a reporter. I was the news reporter for the college paper, did news right out of college. I was a radio news reporter for a couple years and then newspaper work after that. So I always considered it a win if I was getting paid to write. It wasn't until much later when my kids were in their late teens that I actually threw myself into getting money to write fiction, which was always my dream.
When you mentioned way at the beginning that you were teaching, uh, uh, you had mentioned something about teaching. Is that something you wanted to go into? Um, well, what that was going to bring me to was I read that you are also this year, I believe, are going to be teaching a creative writing class online for adult education in Maine. Did you think about going into teaching literature, teaching writing, teaching English while you were still in school?
Yes, I really did. But I kept getting geared towards science. I had this vision of going to school and getting my degree in biology and ending up in the rainforest with the plants extracting a cure for cancer. I was very obsessed with the idea of preserving, not obsessed, I mean, everybody should be anyways, with preserving the rainforest. And all throughout high school, those were the big picture for me, was to go into the sciences and do that for a living. And I wrote a major research paper on it. And it's funny because I have been out of high school for 25 years now. And a lot of what I wrote in that research paper about what we were doing to the rainforest and what it would do to our environment and plant species and biodiversity and everything else has actually happened. Like we've done that. But that was a big concern of mine when I was in high school. And that's why I did go into biology. And I always put the writing and possibly teaching writing, which would have been fabulous too. But I always put that kind of in the back of my mind as something I could do later. But yes, as far as the creative writing courses, I'm doing that for two school districts up here in Maine, actually starting in 2 weeks. I'll be doing a 6-week course for each adult ed program on creative writing. And I'm really looking forward to that because I love, obviously, talking about writing. And I love talking with people who want to write and just want to know where to get started. And that's what this course, both courses are geared towards people who have always wanted to write and are just not sure where to begin. And that's
Mhm.
what it's going to be, a 6-part course on the different elements of where you need to sit down and kind of outline a character development and setting and plot. And it's just going to break it down like that to help people feel like, okay, I've got a map here. I can do this. That's just what I want to share.
Is it open to everyone, anyone, or is it only open to a certain district, certain age group, or do you want to
No,
plug?
it's open to everyone. The one at Noble, which I've posted a link to on my Facebook page, is going to be virtual. So I've had people from Pennsylvania. A high school friend of mine who lives in Texas has just messaged me, and he signed up for it too, because it's virtual. Anyone, anywhere can sign up for it. Massabesic School up here in Maine, that one, as of right now, is going to be in person. So it's only open to people who actually, you don't have to live in the district, but obviously you want to be within driving
Close by.
distance of Massabesic High School.
Well, at least for the Noble one and the online one, everybody who's listening on Facebook and here, and who will hear this later on in the future, watching the
Yeah.
video, what are the dates for the class?
October 19th is the first class for Massabesic, and that's a Monday. And that following Thursday is the first class for Noble.
Is there a deadline to sign up?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. Not that I know of. They're still
All right.
working out some of, especially with Massabesic, because right now, as I don't know if you've heard on the news, but they did have to go remote for 2 weeks because of COVID. And they're not even slated to open up until a day or two before my class is supposed to begin. So it's kind of up in the air whether or not that one's actually going to be in person at this point. And I really can't get a clear answer because, quite frankly, I don't think they know for sure. But one thing I do want to stress is they're for beginners. It's not anything to feel intimidated or think, well, I don't have a degree in English, or I've never, written before, or anything like that. It's really geared towards anyone who is aspiring to start the process and wants to write a story.
Great. So go to Karri's Facebook page, check out the link if you're interested in doing this, and sign up. Sounds like it's going to be a great class.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead down and talk about your writing process. So when do you have, what time of the day do you like to write? Do you just you mentioned that do you carry around the notebook? You were at the restaurant, you had a notebook, you whip it out and start writing.
Yeah.
Has there ever been times where, say you're sitting down at dinner with the family, you're having a conversation, and just say, stop, I got to write this down because a thought came into your head, or you're at a party and that happens. What's your writing process? When do you like to do your writing?
Well, I think as most writers, I'm always thinking about the stories I'm working on, and I'm always thinking of the characters. And even if I'm nowhere near a notebook or near my laptop, it's gnawing at the back of my mind all the time. There's always something that pops up. But for me, I have to jot down the little sparks of things right away. So I've actually pulled the car over before and gotten my Post-it notes out of my purse and just written a sentence so that I'll know later on what I was thinking about. And I do a lot of when I'm by myself, whether I'm driving, when I'm doing the dishes, in the shower, and things like that. That's when certain sentences or ideas or a character will pop into my mind, and I'll have to write a sentence or two just to make sure I don't lose it. I don't have to sit there, alone, or make everybody, leave me alone for an hour or anything, but the gist of what's popped into my head, I have to get out, get it on a piece of paper, and preserve it so that I can get back to it.
So let me interrupt you for just a second, because this thought just popped in my head without getting too personal. When you're in the shower and you have an idea, do you yell it out to somebody, say, hey, somebody write this down real quick? Or do you have remember those crayons that you used to be able to write in the shower and kind of write it on the wall and then rewrite it when you're all dried off? And
I have a waterproof notebook with suction cups. that I bought.
Nice.
It's a waterproof pencil. It's actually made, I forget the name of the actual product, but their tagline was "No more good ideas down the drain." And it is a notebook that is suctioned to the shower, and there's a waterproof pencil. And I have written down a few sentences there. And I'll tear them off and take them with me and put them on my desk so that I remember them. But yeah,
That's,
I have a waterproof notebook.
well, there you go. Waterproof notebook. So do you,
Oh, sorry about that.
that's okay. Um, do you, what do you use? Obviously you use a notebook, but do you prefer writing the scenario down, the scene down, the characters down, or do you use mostly a computer and just have your handwritten notes around you?
I
To add to that.
write all my notes and ideas by hand. I write the outline to my book by hand. Each of my books has their own journal where I wrote down an outline, wrote down my character sketches, wrote down ideas. That's all in actual notebooks with pen. And I have one for each book. Even a new idea that I'm working on, I have written down in here, and I keep this at whatever desk I'm at. And the only thing I do on the laptop, because I'm not one of those Scrivener people who has like an outline on the laptop right in front of my face. It's all on paper. The only thing I do on my laptop is I open up Word and I start chapter 1. And that's where I start writing the book. I don't write my character sketches, my outline, my setting ideas. None of that is done on my laptop. That's all handwritten. And I just use my laptop for the actual story.
writing.
Yeah. I know that's kind of weird because I know a lot of writer friends who, have mind maps all over their computer and do Scrivener with the cork board. And I can't do that. I have to sketch it out with pen and paper.
Well, we spoke to an author a couple weeks ago, and he always starts from the end. He has the finished book or what the ending should be, what he wants it to be. And then he goes back, starts from the beginning, and then kind of brings in the characters and builds up to that. Then we've had other people have outlines. Everything is outlined, different folders and files, be it on computer or in paper. So it's very interesting to hear how everybody's different writing styles and the way they put their books together.
I know the ending to mine. I don't write it out. You have to be a psychopath to write that, actually. I'm just kidding. I know some people who do that or start in the middle. It's actually been recommended to me by a few writer friends who start dead center at a scene in the middle. And I can write out scenes by hand in my notebook, where like even with Darcy and Basil, a conversation that they have on the journey, I wrote out in the notebook before I started writing the book. But I wouldn't start actually writing the book at that point. I just keep that in the notebook. And when I get to that point in the story, I refer to it. But I know the ending in my mind, like with The Weathering of Sea Glass, the last scene and their very last conversation, I knew the entire time from the moment I started that story, I knew that's how it was going to end. And that's what they were going to say to each other. So I never gravitated away from that, but I didn't write it out until I actually got to the last page of that book. And that was the first time I actually typed out those lines, but I know the ending. And like even with A Home for the Windswept, I knew the ending the whole time, but I start chapter 1. Now, there are times where when I have finished, I've obviously scrapped a huge chunk of chapter 1. That's happened before. Like with The Weathering of Sea Glass, how that book starts out, that was actually chapter 2. The original chapter 1 to that book, I took to a writer's group. I took chapter 1 and chapter 2. And a guy in the writer's group said to me, switch it up, make chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 2, chapter 1. So I did a little copy and paste. And boom, I stuck with that. So it doesn't necessarily flow from beginning to end, but it feels like it when I first write it. I start at the very beginning.
You mentioned you had in your new book there, one of your characters has a quirk with fingers. Do you have any particular rituals or quirks when you're writing? Do you twirl your pen, or one of the authors we did earlier, she to kind of get herself in the mood to write, or into that headspace, she um, rings a little chime
Oh,
to do
okay.
that. Do you have anything like that, or do you have any funny little quirks that maybe your husband's or your kids like, well, mom's in the zone because she's spinning her pen or something?
I can't have anywhere else to go. I'm one of those people who I need a big chunk of time. Even if I'm not going to spend 4 hours writing, I can't, like, say if I were to have an appointment at 2 o'clock or somewhere to go at 2, I can't sit there at noon and go, oh, well, I've got 2 hours before I leave the house. I'm going to sit down and write. I can't sit down to write if I know that there's a definite time I have to stop, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I have to know it's an open-ended thing, that everything else I need to do that day, whether it's something silly like dishes or returning an email or making a phone call or something like that, or vacuuming, I mean, just those little things, or running to go do something with a friend or running an errand, I have to have in my mind that, okay, now I get to sit down, open up my laptop, open up the book I'm working on, and I can sit there for as long as I want to sit there. And that might be an hour, that might be 4 hours, but I can't have like a time in mind where I have to stop, because then I can't start. That's just one of my things. I'm a big chunk writer. Most of my books are written, where I'm able to sit there for hours and do my writing. And then I might not be able to open it up again for a couple of days or even a month or more, until I feel like, okay, that's all done. I can sit down and write. It's a reward, because it's my favorite thing to do. And I can't write at night. I know a lot of people who get up super early in the morning and write before people are up, or they write late at night when they're done with everything. And I can't do either of those. I'm after breakfast and after chores kind of are done around the house, or afternoon, like after I ate lunch. Once nighttime hits, it's more of I can't get my brain there. I either read or I watch TV, but I can't sit down. But I can sit down, not to get completely, off on a tangent, but I can sit there with a notebook at night and write down ideas, or write down a few notes, or even like work on a character sketch, some more details about a character. But I can't open up my laptop, open up Word, and throw myself into another chapter of a book I'm writing, unless everything else is done and it's the middle of the day.
Have you ever sat down and started writing knowing that you have nothing ahead of you, and then next thing you know, they're coming to you saying, Mom, hello, dinner's ready, or are you going to make dinner, or like 6 hours have gone by?
I don't know. I mean, you would have to ask my daughter who's listening. I mean, I'm sure she could throw a comment in. I know there are times where they know I was writing and I wanted to work on something, but I didn't really throw myself into my fiction until they were a little older, until they were teenagers. So if I ignored them and their needs, they didn't bother to let me know. So.
Have you ever gotten Have you ever gotten so
So I guess I did all right.
Have you ever gotten so frustrated because nothing, you're sitting there, you're going, but then all of a sudden it just hits a brick wall, and no matter how hard you try, it just won't come out? And have you like thrown the computer or thrown your notebook or just started shredding? Nope, this is crap. I got to go a different direction.
Yes, not in anything I was in the middle of, but at the start of some things. I've had some ideas in my head that I've sketched out with some characters, and had some ideas of where a story could go. And I've sat down to write it and get a few pages in. And I don't throw my computer, because I love my computer. But I have said, this is this is crap. This is not going to be anything more than 5 pages of babbling whenever I think in my head beforehand that it's really something. But yeah, I have done that, and I've gotten stuck. Like in The Weathering of Sea Glass, I got seriously stuck about 75% of the way through. There was, like I said, I knew the ending. And I love the beginning, and I love the trajectory of the story. And I got to a point where I'm like, oh crap, I went from A to B. How the hell do I get to C? I know what C is going to be, but I couldn't make it connect to where it was going to end up. And with that book, I think it was months where I didn't even open it back up, because I'm like, I have no idea how I am going to get her from B to C. And it never, I don't know if some people would have just thought, well, change the ending, keep the story going where it's going and just adapt and change the ending. I never thought to do that, because I knew the ending and I was going to stick with that ending. But I couldn't make the leap. I couldn't make it flow that way. So I didn't even think about it for the longest time. It was honestly months. So what I did was I started running. That's when I started running at the age of 40 for the first time ever in my life. I was never a runner ever. I used to make fun of people who ran. I started running, and it was on a run where the idea came into my head for the character who was going to connect it and take my book to the step I needed it to go to. And it was Wilson Bradley is the name of the character in The Weathering Sea Glass. I remember the run I was on when I thought, oh, this is what's going to happen to her. And that's how she's going to do blah, blah, blah to get to C. And his name even popped in my head. And I remember laughing because his name is Wilson Bradley, and it sounds like a first and last name that's mixed up. And I remember laughing, thinking, oh, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give him that name, and that is who is going to take the story to the next step. So I've been stuck and been stuck for a long time. But if I was in the middle of a novel, I found my way to get unstuck.
Have you ever added anything to your novels that are maybe like pop culture references? Or, well, for an example, we have one author, Tim Baird. He writes fantasy, dragons, things like that. But he has his little quirk is to add like little Star Wars references or like little movie references, but they're just a couple words. But if you're familiar with those movies or that genre or that pop culture icon or whatever, you get it and kind of chuckle out of the head. Did you ever add any of that kind of like humor to?
I don't think so much in my early ones. If I did it kind of unintentionally. But with Darcy and Basil's story, A Home for the Windswept, when they get stuck in Pennsylvania, he is basically forced to try Scrapple. Have you ever heard of Scrapple?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I worked that in because I wanted to throw in some Pennsylvania flavors. So all of my like hometown friends, when they read that, they'll get, the reference and the face he makes and the way it looks and everything else. So I would throw in those little nods to home in A Home for the Windswept when they're stranded there. And there's other parts of that leg of their journey that I intentionally worked in as kind of a homage to my hometown. So little things like that, but I wouldn't say pop culture references, at least none that I consciously did.
Yeah. No, I think it was more like you described, things that a nod to certain people or certain, things that a small group of people would get or understand and see and appreciate. How has, you mentioned COVID a while back, how has COVID affected your writing, your ability to write, the times that you write?
Well, two
If at all.
things. What's that?
If at all, has it affected you at all?
Yeah, it definitely did. Two things happened right before COVID that impacted my creative process altogether. I hurt my foot and ended up in an air cast. So when COVID hit, I was like one into kind of being immobile. So I couldn't run anymore, which is a real way I kickstart my brain and stuff. And I also landed a research gig for a podcast company. It's a political podcast. They needed somebody to research William Butler Yeats and his poem, The Second Coming, which was written in 1920. And they wanted somebody like me, I got hired to do it, to do a lot of research into Yeats and how this poem is connected to 2020, as far as it was the end of World War I. There was the Irish Rebellion, which Yeats was a big part of, being an Irish poet, the rise of fascism and Mussolini, and then the Spanish flu. All of this stuff unfolding in 1920, and it really is emphasized in this poem, and they wanted to relate it to 2020. And then COVID hit, so that added an extra layer to it. So I got this research job, and I threw myself into that. And I thought, as my other part-time job closed down for months, I thought, well, I'm going to have plenty of time to write. I'll do this Yeats research, and then I'll be able to, I can write a whole book. Because as you know, a lot of people were saying how, Shakespeare wrote everything on lockdown, and everybody's, was coming up with these creative things, and Taylor Swift put out a whole album, and everybody's juices were flowing, and my creative juices weren't. I was, having, like I said, worked in news and stuff before. I was glued to the news. I spent the first couple of weeks of the pandemic just watching the numbers and the statistics and just paying too much attention and becoming immersed in it, all day, because I couldn't run. I was in an air cast. The only other thing I had to do was this Yeats research, which was just as depressing because it was about the Spanish flu and tying it into what was happening now. So I couldn't create. Well, then we got an exercise bike to kind of have something to do here in the house. And it was while I was doing that I started listening to other podcasts to kind of, go along with the Yeats research I was doing. And during one of the podcasts I was listening to, an author I like mentioned her publishing house and who had published her last book. And I thought, oh, that's what I need to be doing, is researching some more small publishers for A Home for the Windswept. Because at that time it was complete. Complete at the time. I went back and did some edits, but I wasn't writing anything new. And I thought, I can use this time to kind of do some professional development, seek out some small publishers. And it was because of my lack of creative juices, lack of a story, that I threw myself into finding something to do with the story I'd already created. And that's when I got a contract with Black Rose Writing. I started sending out my book more, and I heard back from them in May. They asked for a full, and by the beginning of June, I signed a publishing contract. And if the pandemic hadn't have stopped the creative feeling, I don't think I would have thrown my energy into researching and had landed that publishing contract. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise that I couldn't create at the time, but that's loosening up some now. I've started on something new. I'm not sure if it's garbage or not. I'm about 20 pages into it, but yeah, it put a halt to doing anything new creatively. And that's what opened the door to taking A Home for the Windswept to the next level.
Oh, before you gave that to the publisher, did you have, with this book or your previous books, beta readers, people who would read for you to help you edit, say this is good, this is eh?
Yeah. I sent it out to a couple of friends of mine, and one, a mutual, good friend of mine, author that you know very well, Stacy.
Go ahead, you can mention her name.
Yeah, Stacy Rico. She's awesome. And
Yep.
she and I actually read one of hers, because that was something else I was doing more of. Instead of writing, I did a lot more reading during the pandemic, and some Netflix binging of a few things that my kids suggested. But I did read more, and Stacy sent me one of hers that I read and did a little critique of, and she did A Home for the Windswept. And I had a couple of hometown friends who did the same, and a couple beta readers, people that have been a part of book clubs that have done my books, that I really value their opinion on current fiction. So yeah, I did send it out to a few beta readers, but without the pandemic hitting, I would not have put the effort into seeking out a small publisher. That's what really kind of gave me the will to do that. It was the time and not getting anything else out of here. So, but yeah, I did spend a lot more time reading and was a beta reader as I sought out beta readers.
The first three books were self-published, correct?
Yes, yes.
What was the difference in pros and cons between self-publishing versus going out and getting a publisher?
Well, right now, with having gone out and gotten this publisher, I'm a nervous wreck when it comes to the cover because that's in their hands, along with the basic marketing. They're going to do up a press kit and everything. And while if you had asked me 5 years ago if I would have, been a nervous wreck about that, or if that would have mattered, I would have said, heck no. It's kind of nerve-wracking now because I have done it myself and I like doing it myself. I like total control of the cover. I like total control of the marketing of it and how I present it and where I take it and how I do it. And as you know, I've done a lot of events around New England and festivals. That's how, I met you guys and everything. And on my own, doing it as a regional fiction author, I've sold a couple thousand copies. So I've been really, really happy with how I've marketed myself. Turning it over to somebody else, well, there's definite pros because they're going to be able to take it out further than New England, obviously, and reach, a broader audience. The biggest con is that I don't have that control. So it makes me kind of nervous. And it'll probably be about a month or two before I see their vision for the cover. And that's kind of, got me a little anxious. But I can say that I love the covers for their other books. I do scan their website a lot and I follow all their social media. And whenever they show a new release, I'm always like, wow, that looks awesome. But having it out of my hands that's a little nerve-wracking. So it could be a great pro because it could look awesome and be something that I would have never been able to create on my own, or it could be a big con because it could totally not match my vision. So we'll see.
As a self-publisher, and for other self-publishers out there, what are the most or the absolute most important aspect of marketing your book?
Well, as somebody who had no marketing experience except for writing marketing blogs for other people, it was a learning process. You can't be afraid to try. You can't be afraid to walk into a small local bookstore and hand them your book and say, this is what I've got and this is why you might like it. You have to come out of that writer's shell, because I would much rather be like other writers who just get to do the writing and hand it over and not have anything else to do with what happens to it and how it goes from there. But when you do it on your own, you really have to step up and work. It's a lot of work, going to those festivals, talking nonstop to people, following up with people and creating an author page and really sticking with it. It makes a difference. But it is a lot of work. I could do more. Like there's always more I could be doing, but I've just been happy with keeping it where I've got it, because the main thing for me was just being able to share my stories and get some good feedback from people who were touched by certain things in my books. But it really is a lot of work, and it's not easy. I'm not a big I'm not this instinctual market myself kind of person, but you have to learn how to be, or how to pretend that you're comfortable being that person. So you have to put in the work.
What would you say is a don't do that you learned?
Oh, that's a tough one. Oh, I don't know. I mean, as far as doing it myself as a don't, I guess would be don't limit yourself. I kind of limited myself at first to just driving to a few bookstores here and there. I wish I had put more effort into kind of launching my books before I had them in hand. I guess that would be a thing, is don't just wait until you get your box of books to go, oh, hey, everybody, I wrote a book. I would, if I could go back in time, I would start that process earlier, saying, this is what I'm working on, and this is what I'm going to have it for you guys, and really kind of, put the word out there ahead of time. You see people do like launch parties and things like that. I didn't really do a lot of that, other than posting on Facebook a picture of my book saying, this is what I did. If you want one, send me a message. And I kind of let it grow from there. So I would say a don't would be to don't wait. If you know you're going to have a book in hand and you're going to put in the time and energy to actually make it a real life product in your hand, do the work beforehand to let everybody know. And don't be afraid to ask people if they want your book. I know a lot of people who, like one author friend of mine who, when I told her about people in my hometown, I am not exaggerating when I say, when I posted my book, at least 100 people from my wonderful, amazing small town in Pennsylvania started sending me messages saying, of course I want to send me a signed copy. And I sold out of my first box in like a heartbeat. I know somebody who told me, oh, I could never put it up there and ask people from home. Like, those are the people who always knew that's what you wanted to do and supported you, when you were 17 saying you were going to do that sometime. Of course, put it out there and say, hey, if you want one. So don't limit yourself, and don't wait until it's done to actually speak up and say, hey, this is what I've done.
We had one book, or a customer come in and ask for one book in particular, a Maine author, up in Bangor, I think. And so we went out, looked for it. We were able to get a hands on a few copies. I said we had it, tagged him in the Facebook post, and he ran with it. He posted it, he shared it, ended up getting 70 some odd thousand likes, because he had friends. No, he had friends across the country. I was getting orders from Georgia, from Wisconsin, from California, from Texas. I had to go and scramble to the publisher. Thankfully, it was a local publisher, and they were back ordered. It was a surprise hit for them for the summer, but they were able to scrounge up about 30 copies, and I sold 2/3 of them just from back orders.
Wow.
So you never know what's going to happen by sharing one post and
Yep.
Where your book is. Is it really? That's my biggest thing. Is it's important to keep telling people where your books are. Now, I know there's other platforms that shall not be named where, writers need to have their books, but one of the important things is to let everybody know, do the work and let everybody know where your books are. You never know when it's going to take off.
Yep. Yeah. And you never know who's going to stumble on them either. Because we live in a tourist area. In the summer times, people are up and down the coast and in all those little shops. And I, like yours, I had somebody post a picture of my book on Twitter. She lived in Chicago, and she posted a picture of the Weathering of Sea Glass and of my signature on the inside, because I sign them all, when I take them to stores and stuff. And she posted it on Twitter and said, I was in this tiny little shop and I bought this book on vacation and it's signed by the author. And I have no idea who she is, but because she posted it on Twitter, Lord knows who else saw that and thought to look it up or even just follow me, because she tagged me in it and followed me. And yeah, but like you said, you never know who's going to see it, who's out there, who it's going to appeal to. That's why, like at the craft fairs and the festivals, I talk nonstop to people and say, this is a great idea for your Aunt so-and-so who moved away in Mrs. Maine, and it's regional fiction, which you can't get your hands on too much anymore. And you just never know whose hands are going to open your book and where it could lead. I'm still waiting for somebody to call me up and say, I read your book and we're going to make a movie of it if you'll, take this big check.
I will get to that question in a minute. I have that written down because I've been asking that one. We'll get to that one in a second. But we do have one author in our store who, whenever she travels, she always takes a couple extra copies with her, and she leaves them at the airport with a little note saying, I hope you enjoy this, and a business card or a bookmark, whatever, with her blog or a Facebook page and all that. Have you ever done anything like that?
No. I have taken my books when I've gone home to visit family. I would have a couple with me. Like 2 summers ago, we went to my husband's family, and I knew there were going to be some people there that I hadn't seen in a few years, and they ended up buying some from me. But I have never done that. In fact, I kick myself all the time because I rarely even have my business cards with me. I'll be out and about and I'll meet somebody and say, I'm an author and I write, and they're like, oh, where can I find your books and blah, blah, blah. And I would tell them I have an author page on Facebook or email, and I rarely have my cards with me. That's a big mistake I make. I don't think to market myself unless I'm in a particular situation where that's my plan. Like I have an event or I'm taking my books to a certain store. If I'm just out and about on a normal day, I'm not prepared. And that's another don't.
That's another don't. There you go. That's right. That's right. So let's move away from the written word and to the audible world. I didn't want to use audible. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. The audiobook world. Audible, of course, we all know is that who shall not be named version of audiobooks. For us, it's Libro FM. Have you ever thought of putting your books into audiobook format?
Actually, this next one, this is, they have certain people review it. And once the release date is set, which is April, but right before the release date, they'll decide whether or not to turn it into an audio book. So that's another thing that will be in their hands if they decide that it's worthy of that, but I won't know that for a while. My other ones, I never really put the effort into trying. I hate to say it, but it's not something I've really thought about. I just lug my boxes of my physical books around and say that they're available on the he who shall not be named site. But no, I haven't really thought much about it. And I guess I probably should.
With this new book, when it does come to the audiobook format, is it something that you would want to read for yourself or have somebody read it for you?
Somebody else.
Somebody else.
Yeah, I can't, no. I don't think I would feel comfortable. Even though I did radio and stuff, it's not like a voice issue. It's just, I think I would rather listen to someone else's interpretation and voice doing it. I wouldn't want to hear myself reading it, to tell you the truth.
There are professional audiobook actors, voice actors out there, but if you could pick any actor in the world to portray the characters in this book, who would they be?
Darcy is short with dark hair, and what's her name? I just watched oh shoot, I can't think of her name right now. She's a little on the shorter side. She's pretty in He's Just Not That Into You, the main character who falls in love with Josh, what's his face? I can't think of her name. She's cute as a button. She would be a perfect Darcy. And Basil is tall with kind of a wavy blonde hair. He would be, if Matthew McConaughey were to find a time machine and go back 20 years, he would be perfect for that.
Are you thinking of Jennifer Goodwin?
Yes. Yeah.
She was in that. I thought it was a great show to begin with until they started sort of the new version of it. It was Once Upon a Time. Once Upon a Time?
Oh yeah. The
Snow White.
The fairy tale, the Snow White. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, she would be a good Darcy in my mind.
So as a voice, or also as, well, we're talking the big screen now too, as the actor. Is there a particular just a person that you'd like to have as the voice, or her voice as well as part of?
Her voice could work, I think. Yeah. I mean, because they're, I think so.
So one thing, and of course, this is my little plug, is we do partner with a company called Libro FM. They're an audiobook company. A lot of people are switching to them from the Audible platform. one thing that I did learn is that Audible has an exclusivity policy. So something to talk to your publisher about when it comes time for
Okay.
that. We do have an author. Her books are doing really well in our store. She's been in the top 5 bestsellers for our store, anyways, since the past 2 years. But the exclusivity just ran out with Audible, so now she's able to get her books through Libro. So now I can go ahead and promote that, and which I'll do. I mean, if you're on Libro, I'll throw that out there and put that link there. So just something to keep in mind when
Yeah.
it comes time, something to ask them about if it's going to be exclusive on there, or if there's a way not to, or to bring up Libro and see about that. But anyways, that's my little plug for Libro. So we have a few minutes left. Checking my notes here. Oh, you mentioned Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
And you were listening to that. How has any particular songs, such as Taylor Swift's or anybody else's, or any movies, influenced your writing?
Definitely songs. There will be lyrics that I hear that spark an idea or spark like something I want somebody to say to someone else. I particularly remember an incident where I was working on Moose Pond Lodge with Molly, and a point of wanting to just give up on everything. She, her father was an alcoholic. She's drinking too much, messy divorce, not sure she can do it. She's at a really low point. And I was driving the car, and I don't even remember which song it was because it will just be snippets and lyrics. And the one line said about waving a white flag. And I had to pull over and write that down because I'm like, that's what she's going to yell out at this point. She's just going to yell out, I'm waving the white flag here. She's just surrendering. So yeah, different lyrics will stand out at me. Not too much movies. I think because they're visual, I would feel like I was maybe like plagiarizing if there were certain scenes or events in a movie that I kind of twisted and used, but definitely lyrics to songs. And there's certain songs and music I listen to when I'm writing. I have, a writer's playlist where, there's some Joni Mitchell and James Taylor and Simon and Garfunkel and some Taylor Swift. I don't care what anybody says. Folklore is a really great album, and I could listen to that. I could listen to that on a loop. My daughter's the one who actually told me there were certain songs on there I need to listen to, and it's just that kind of mellow, soft, deep lyrics that just get your brain working a certain way. And I'll have that kind of music on my headphones, or before I write, there'll be certain things that I'll listen to on my writer's playlist. And the coffee house music station on Sirius, I'll turn that on the TV and have that playing in the background when I'm writing if I'm not listening to my writer's playlist or certain albums like that. But yeah, like
Shannon says, yeah, I agree about folklore.
Yeah, an army friend, wife of Shannon, who I've been seeing since we lived in Fort Knox, and her daughter Bailey's on here. But yeah, folklore is just, I don't care what anybody says about Taylor Swift. The girl can write beautiful music. And so it's songs like that really get my brain working, and the lyrics will spark ideas. But like I said, that day driving, I still remember pulling over and thinking that's what she's gonna wave the white flag. That's what she's gonna yell out. And it's, pivotal stuff like that sticks with you, and you have to write it down at the time because, you won't remember it if you don't. So.
Have your husband or your kids, when you're cruising down the road or the highway, you have one of those thoughts, you yank the wheel, you pull over to the side, start writing it down, saying, will you stop doing that?
No, because those things happen when I'm alone.
Okay.
If I'm with them, but I will write in the car, like if I'm driving, but if my husband's driving, and I'll write down stuff in the car, especially long car rides. Like I remember rides to Pennsylvania where I'm writing down sentences and ideas. And this new one, Home for the Windswept, there's a lot about the trees, obviously. The pine trees in Maine are deeply, meaningful to Darcy for obvious reasons, for the paper mill and just that's what's always been her cocoon in life. And so this last trip we took to Pennsylvania, I was writing down about the sight of those trees swooshing by when we're on the highway, and Darcy kind of, that's in the book, basically, how I was feeling about those trees whizzing past. So yeah, things like that I'll do when I'm a passenger, but not when I'm driving.
So in the last few minutes, way back, you mentioned Willa Cather and Louisa May Alcott. Who are some of the other? Who are you reading now?
Little Fires Everywhere. I just started that, based on listening to Brene Brown's podcast with the author. And also she did a podcast right after that where she was talking to Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington about acting in the series, which I didn't watch. And I purposely didn't watch it because I thought, I'd rather read the book. I think everybody who likes to read does that first, where you won't watch a certain series if you plan to read it. But I just bought that and just started it. So that's
We're doing that. We're doing that with The Handmaid's Tale. I've waited forever, and we just finally caught up to the 21st century and got Hulu.
I read that in college. I had to read that in college.
I love the book. Very angering, but I love the book. And now, we're watching the series. But do you have a favorite genre or a favorite book outside of what you normally read? So, for example, I like to read a lot of nonfiction, like ology books, sociology, psychology, philosophy books. But after so long, I have to just get myself into a good sci-fi, dragons or Tolkien style book, just to kind of get my head out of nonfiction stuff.
I like biographies, especially like women that I've admired, from like Katharine Graham. I love Katharine Graham, and I've read her autobiography and other books about her, and typical like Eleanor Roosevelt I'll read biographies of, and other like Queen Noor. I still remember her biography sticking with me. So biographies are something I'll throw myself into. But as far as fiction, like I love Eric Larson, The Devil in the White City, and the name escaped. Right after Devil in the White City. I have it on my shelf and I can picture the cover, but I can't remember the name of it. But I like his style because you can't just read through it. If like Devil in the White City and Eric Larson, he does like a whole chapter of history related to the event and the time period, and then it's like a whole chapter of a fictional tale that's unfolding during this, and then he goes back to very, very detailed historical writing about that certain event and certain time period. So it gets your brain working both ways. I couldn't write like that, but I do really enjoy Eric Larson. And,
is it Dead Wake? Is it Dead Wake?
No.
The Splendid?
Is that one of his?
The Splendid and the Vile? I think that one is one that just came out.
No, it's not anything new. Ooh, and Malcolm Gladwell. I love his books on the brain. I mean, all of his books. And normally I don't sit and read that kind of stuff, but I find it fascinating about how we think and how we act and why. So I enjoy that, even though it's not anything remotely related to what I would write.
Well, unfortunately, we're at the end of this. I have a bunch of other questions that we could just go on, but there is one question, though, that I do have from Heather Doyle, and I wanted to save it kind of for the end. But she said because there's too much background noise with her kiddos, she's going to let me ask. She says, I'm very excited about your new book release. April can't come soon enough. Are you working on a sequel to your new book? If not a sequel, another title? And you mentioned that you do have something kind of in the works. And
yeah, after I got the writing contract from Black Rose Writing, and I kind of relaxed and things mellowed out and got kind of back to normal, I did start something new that had been burning in the back of my mind for a while. And it started with this character name that I had to make up a story revolving around her. And her name is Abilene Marigold Matterly. And the name was the first thing that came to me. And I'm like, I have to make something about this girl. And it's going to tie into her father being in the Army when she does find him and reconnect with him. And she's going to experience life on an Army base in her teens, trying to uncover the truth about her past. And she's going to fall in love with a soldier. So that's going to happen. On this one, I don't even know the ending. It's still like in the works. The first, like 2 chapters I think I have written, and I'm not even positive for the first time if what I've written will be the real story. But I know that I love Abilene Marigold Matterly, and I'm writing something about her. I have no idea where it'll go or when it will end, but yeah, that's what I'm working on right now.
Do you have a timeline as to when it will end and when
Nope.
it'll be out, or just kind of going with it, huh?
No, it's just who I know I'm going to write a book about, and I'm working on making the story happen as I write it, and just kind of percolating in the back of my mind what's going to happen to her, and the story behind her name, because of course there's a story behind her being named Abilene, and related to the town and her past, and I have no idea yet what actually is all going to happen, but it's there, and there will be a book with Abilene as the main character.
Great. Well, Jill Muir says she so loved this, and I want to say that I did as well. Yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you very much for being part of our Meet the Author. Again, all of Karri's books can be found at our store, and we also are partnered with bookshop.org. That's another place that you can get it if you want to help support your local bookstores, those that are partnered with them, which we are, bookshop.org. You can go straight to them, search for our store, select that, you get our homepage, and then you can search for her books and you can buy them straight through them. And then we also get a portion of the sales. But we'd love to see you and have you come in and buy straight from us. You never know also what else you're going to find. Like Stacy's
store. You guys have
book.
such an eclectic, yeah. You guys have the best selection and the best setup, and it's just such a welcoming atmosphere. You got great coffee and everything else too, and so.
Well, unfortunately, we're not doing the coffee. We're not doing the coffee right now because that's kind of. But we're hoping to get that started again. But we definitely do have local art, local artisanal stuff, yeah, just a lot of. Thank you very much. It's we try to make it a very.
The bottles of wine.
Yes, bottles of wine. We can sell bottles of wine and mead there too. So again, thank you very much for being a part of this, and we look forward to getting your new book in April.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I can't wait. I can't wait to see the cover for myself, and I will share it as soon as I get my hands on it. And thank you guys, every one of you. There's a couple people on here I haven't seen in person in forever, and I just miss all you guys, and I really appreciate you tuning in and listening to me babble. So thank you.
All right. Well, have a good night, everybody, and hope to see you at our next one. Tomorrow night is Jeff Benedict. He's got a great book on the New England Patriots, so we hope you join us for that one. And again, thank you again, Karri, for joining us.
Thank you. I'll see you soon.